So today's demo is going to be on Animal Faces 2.3, and again this is going to extend off of our understanding of using the shape builder as well as shape tools. There'll also be some introduction to the eyedropper and the direct selection tool. So what I like to do first is, again, always make sure that your workspace is set up correctly. So if you go to the menu bar, then go to workspace and make sure that Essentials Classic is set. And if it is set, you can always hit Reset Essentials Classic. That just makes sure you have the full tool set available to you. You can see there's a blank area below here, and that's where we're going to try to recreate these images above, down below. And if I was to look at these, I would say they're using mainly simple shapes. There's some rounded corners, and there's some use of like stroke. So like drawing lines and then applying a stroke to them. So let's just start with what looks like a kind of orange cat here. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at the basic shape. So in this case, I would say it could start with a square, and then I can round out the bottom part of the square. Sometimes what I'll do, so I'm going to my rectangle tool, I can actually like draw the shape over the object to approximate the same dimensions. I'm going to just change this color to black right now because it probably will not preload in the right color. So I'll draw this object over the animal, and now I've got like generally like the right shape or right dimensions. If I drag the bottom up, I can bring it right to the edge there. And so now I've just got like the basic dimensions for that face. Now to get the right color, what I can do is I can click on the actual object that I want to modify, and then right here you can see the eyedropper tool. So hotkey I will bring it up, or if you click on it, you can then click on something that you want to sample. So if I click on the cat, you'll notice this square then changes to that color. So that's our first move. We got just the basic shape. Now if you notice in each of the corners of this object, there's this little widget right here. It looks like a circle with a little like blue dot inside of it. And this is actually going to modify the corners. So if I grab one of those and pull it in, it'll actually round out the entire object. So it kind of pulls it almost into like a circular shape. So that's one thing I want to introduce, is just like how you can actually round corners by pulling on that little corner widget right there. So that's step one. Sometimes though, in this object, we only want to round certain corners, and this is where we can actually use our direct selection tool. So it's the white arrow. I can then click on the corner that I want to modify, so say this bottom right corner, and then I can click on that widget, the rounding corner widget, and just pull it up on one side. So I'm going to do that there on the right. Then again, in my direct selection tool, I'm going to click on the anchor point in the left part of the square. Then I'll click on the round corner widget, which is that little circle, and I can pull it up. And so it just rounds out the bottom part of that object so that it looks like we have a chin with like a square head on the top part. So the ears are basic shapes. I can go to my polygon tool that's below the ellipse tool. If I click and drag out, you can see a triangle is already set. Typically it's preloads with like an octagon, and if I hit the down arrow, it'll go all the way to a triangle. I like to hold shift too because it flattens out the bottom of the triangle, so it makes it nice and straight. So that's going to be step one. I've got the triangle set up. But you can notice the triangle actually leans to one side, right? So this corner on the left needs to come in. So again, I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to get my direct selection tool, so the white arrow. I'll click on the left anchor point once, and then I'll click and hold on it and drag it to the right. So now I've created the triangle so that it has a flat edge on one side, kind of like the image that we're seeing up above. Now if I want to modify the height, again, same thing, using the direct selection tool, I can click on the top arrow and then just pull it down. And that just kind of like approximates the general shape. The neat thing about drawing in Illustrator is like whenever you have an object created once, you can always duplicate it. So I'm going to use the Alt-click drag to duplicate this ear. So I'm going to click on the ear with my selection tool. I'm going to hold Alt, creates the copy arrows. I'll click and drag and then release the mouse. And now I've got a second ear. The only problem is that this ear is in the wrong orientation, and so there's a quick way to flip it around. If I just click on it, I can then go to Object, Transform, and then Reflect right here through your menu options. And you can see now the object actually flips into that right orientation. So that's pretty straightforward. Once you have this, you could actually merge all of these shapes together. So if I click and drag across them, do a selection rectangle, I can then use my shape builder, Shift M, and then click and drag across those three shapes, and now they're all joined together. Not a necessary step, but it's not a bad one to actually use. The last thing to consider is like these little eye shapes, the nose and the mouth, and these will all be finished with actual strokes. And so what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to take my ellipse tool and I'm going to draw a perfect circle. That looks pretty good. I'm going to make it fill with black and white, and then I'm going to get rid of my fill so it's just a black stroke. And so this is what I have so far. Now over in my panels, you're going to see this little tool here called stroke, and it looks like three horizontal lines. The top one is thin, the middle one's a little thicker, and the bottom one is the thickest. And so if I click on my stroke panel there, you can see stroke weight is actually modifiable here. I can also see that there's, in this little like pancake stack here, there's a show options tab, and so I can click on that. And this gives me the full extent of like what I can modify with strokes. So the first thing is weight. So if I increase weight, you can see those lines get thicker. And now we can actually modify this to create that little like smiley face shape eye right there. So again, going back to using my direct selection tool, I'm going to click on the circle once. That activates it. Then I'm going to click on the topmost anchor point right there in that circle, and then I'll hit backspace on my keyboard. And what it ends up doing is it just deletes that one anchor point, and so now I just have this like smiley face to create somewhat of this eye look. We could get into making it more specific to the image above, but I'm going to say this is fine for what we're achieving today. The last thing is rounding out the edges with the strokes panel, and you can see there's this little option here, round cap, and when I click on it, you can see the stroke then gets this little like circular ending to it, and so it creates a nicer transition for this little eye shape. I'll adjust the scale, so I'm going to put it up here for comparison. I'll use Shift and Alt to scale it down. That looks about right. And then again, in my strokes panel, I'm just going to increase the stroke until it looks like it's about the same thickness. And so in this case, it looks like somewhere around 4 is about the same thickness that I'm seeing in the image there. So I've got one eye. If I use Alt, I can click and drag it. Now I've got 2 eyes. And you'll notice as well with some of these things, like the mouth is almost the same piece as well. So I'll do another Alt click drag and put that down there. So that's starting to take shape. Lastly, I've got just a vertical line and then a little triangle. So let's go ahead and create those. To create my line, I'll take my pen tool, so hotkey P. I'm going to click above the mouth, then I'll click down to where it intersects with the mouth. To get out of the pen tool, I can hit Escape, or I can just change to a different tool. And so we've got that starting to take shape there. Maybe the mouth looks a little weird. I don't know. And then the last thing is just getting that nose shape. So then I'll zoom in here. I'm going to go to my tools. I'm going to pull out my polygon tool for shapes. In this case, I'm going to get a triangle. Make it a black triangle. And then rotate it. So click on it with my selection tool. I go outside the bounding box to where I get the rotation arrow. and I'll rotate it so the triangle is downward facing. The last thing we're going to do, you can notice, is like the triangle is kind of sharp edged. So I'm going to look for my little corner widgets, and I'm going to round out those corners just a little bit. And generally, I would say this is a close approximation of this little cat. Now it's up to you aesthetically if you want to like modify like the mouth, maybe make the mouth a little wider. Maybe that makes it look a little better. You can update those things according to your aesthetic. And so once you're done here, like one thing I might do is just group it all. So if I do a selection rectangle over the whole thing and then do Control G, then it groups that whole creature together. Something I might consider is like, since you actually like put all this work into this first object, if you do an Alt-click drag and then a Control D, you can use this as almost like your base model for building the other faces. So you might need to modify it somewhat, but it can be like a great starting point for your next figure. With the dog, it's pretty much like the cat, only the ears are different. They're more pointy, and the points come to the tips of that face shape. You've also got these ellipses that are white for like the cheeks. And then this looks like a panda. The panda has a rounded rectangle, and then I'll show kind of like a basic layout for how to get those ears behind. So I'm going to snip off the ears of this one. So Shift M, Alt, use my shape builder to take those ears off. I'm then going to use my direct select and click on the face shape. I'll hit I for the eyedropper, and I'll sample that color. I'll then click on the rounded corners. I'm going to click on just one corner and I'll round it in. And this is going to be a modified kind of panda. The eyes are pretty simple in that they're just going to be gray circles. So I'll get my shapes tool out. I'll get the ellipse, draw a circle, hit I to eyedrop it. I've got one eye. I'll do an Alt-click drag for the second eye. And then if I was to actually use the same like eyes that are in behind these circles, I can actually do that by arranging this circle behind them. And so if I right click on it, it brings up a dialog box, and then I can go to these arrangement functions here, which you can do send backwards or send to back. And you can see Control left bracket or Shift Control left bracket. So I'm just going to click on one, and I'm going to do Control left bracket until it goes behind. I'm going to ungroup this, and then I'll do Control left bracket. And you can see I've stepped this colored eye behind this little smiley face. So Control left bracket on the other one, and it steps it until this eye goes behind. And so that's kind of like dealing with like having these like shapes of these pieces of paper, and you're kind of like arranging like which one sits on top of which. Lastly, let's get those ears in. So I've got a circle. I'm going to eyedrop the color of that panda, and then there's a black circle sitting on top of it. So if I take another circle, eyedrop, make it black, and then scale it down, I can arrange it to sit on top of the other one. Something like that. I'm going to group these together with Control G. And then the last thing I need to do is just send this behind the actual head. So if I place it there, right click, arrange, and then send to back, looks like there's an image in front of it, so I'm going to bring it right up there. So, or if you just click on the image and go Control left bracket until it actually like toggles behind that object, you'll kind of see when it actually looks like it actually goes behind there. Once it's behind, I can do a simple alt-click drag and place another one over there. And now I've got this, again, a somewhat close approximation to this image up above. I'll leave the dog undone, and I'll let you guys figure that out. But again, learning how to use our strokes tool to increase the stroke and also change the cap, as well as the eyedropper tool to sample colors. And lastly, using right-click, arrange, and send to back to play with arrangement of objects. That'll finish our demo here.